You're listening to the Screenmen Society Podcast, where nothing on screen will ever go unseen. Here's your host, Jack Clayton.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Jay to the Clay, and welcome to the first ever Screenmen Society Podcast. Here you'll hear the opinions from different screenmen and different guests, and I couldn't think of a better introductory panel than who we have today. First up, we have the lover of all things DC. We have Kevin Burke.
That's right, Kevman in the building. What's up, everyone?
Next up, don't get this mad lad talking when it comes to Harry Potter or horror. It's Abel Velasquez.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
And finally, he works at GameStop, so naturally he knows everything about video games. It's John Spurgeon.
Hello.
So, gentlemen, this being our first ever episode, it's going to be a lot of introductory material. So first of all, I want us to each go around and give us your favorite movie, your favorite director, your favorite TV show, and your favorite video game. Abel, we're going to start with you.
All right. So, favorite movie, it's Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Watched it all the time, probably 100 times. It's a masterpiece. And then my favorite show, Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's one of the greatest shows ever made. And my favorite director, I have a few, but I would say I like Edgar Wright's films a lot. I think of any director, if they're making a movie, I'll 100% go see Edgar Wright. And for video game, it's BioShock. There's no other game that I thought had such an interesting,
Yes. Okay.
Such an interesting story, and then at the end, just completely threw my mind around. Was a master. It's one of my absolute favorite games.
Awesome, John. We'll go over to you.
All right. So for my favorite movie, definitely got to be The Grand Budapest Hotel. Classic. Wes Anderson is a genius. The way he sets up shots is amazing and different than any other director in the business. So obviously, Wes Anderson is my favorite director too. I mean, I just can't think of a bad film he's put out. Isle of Dogs just came out, and that was amazing. It's so funny how he can do both live action and then he can do stuff that's, claymation or animated, whatever you want to call it. It's a mix of the two, but he does both of them so well and so intelligently that he's definitely my number one big boy. For my favorite TV show, I'm not a huge TV show guy, but probably Futurama. Futurama mixes comedy and emotion really well in a way I don't think any other show does, because a lot of those comedy sci-fi shows usually take it, to the next step in comedy and forget that, emotion can always be a thing in that kind of a show. And I think Futurama does emotion pretty well. So I like Futurama a lot. And as the lead video game, expert in the whole wide world, Mario Odyssey, man, that game is legendary. That game is an experience. If you have a Switch and you haven't played Mario Odyssey, I'm going to come slap you. I'm going to come give you the front hand and the back hand, because Mario Odyssey is amazing. It's one of the best games of all time. In my opinion, it is the best game of all time. So.
All right. Kevin, you're up.
Alrighty. Hey, everyone. I would just like to start out by saying that my favorite movie of all time is Lord of the Rings, as in all of them. No, I'm just kidding. If I had to choose one, since you guys are hard asses, I think I would choose The Return of the King, obviously, because it's a masterpiece. I mean, come on. All right. So that being said, my favorite director of all time, as in film director of all time, I think I have to go with Tim Burton on that one. He's just an incredibly imaginative director. Sort of similar to Wes Anderson, he's played around with a little bit of claymation, Corpse Bride, stuff like that. Frankenweenie, I just love his style, that, gothic, romantic stuff. Oh, it's just good stuff. Yeah, just not a lot of he's diverse too. He's really diverse. But yeah, anyway, my favorite TV show of all time, it's really hard, but I think it comes down to Game of Thrones and Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. And you know what?
Is that the new one?
Yeah, that's the new one.
I've never seen it.
I think I'm going to go with Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated as my favorite show of all time. I just love that show. I could watch it any day of the week, anytime, anywhere. I could watch it, taking a poop. Like, it's just good. So, anyway, my favorite video game of all time, it's Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. Shout out to the GameCube. Let's go, Nintendo boys. Unite. It's so good. Oh, my gosh. Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. There will never be another game like it. Oh, so good.
Awesome. And I'll round it out. For my favorite movie, I think I'm going to have to go with La La Land. I'm diehard.
Boo.
Listen, I'm a diehard Marvel fanboy at heart, but I wanted to choose something that was different. And La La Land, I think, is the last movie that really like impacted me, and I could rewatch that movie 1,000 times. I could re-listen to the songs 1,000 times. It was just a special movie for me. Favorite director, however, though, is completely different because I love Damien Chazelle, but he's not been around enough quite yet. So I'm gonna go with my main man, Christopher Nolan. That dude, every time he puts out a movie, he just like one-ups himself, I feel like, in a different way. Like, obviously, like, Inception's completely different from Dunkirk, but they're still two complete masterpieces. And I think one thing is also the fact that he didn't go to film school. So he is kind of just like an inspiration that maybe one day I can get to his godlike levels too. For TV shows, I love Game of Thrones as well, but I think the one that I have to go with is Daredevil, just because diehard Marvel fanboy. Daredevil's my favorite superhero of all time, and that show is just so amazing. Even with season 2, which people consider a slump, is still perfection. And so yeah, and then season 3 is just phenomenal. So that's what I'm gonna have to go with. And then for my favorite video game, I think I'm gonna have to go with Star Wars Battlefront 2, but like the OG one. I put so many hours into that game, and that one's just it was just so amazing. I remember putting so many hours into that game. I just love it. So
That's actually my runner-up. That's a great game.
Yeah.
I was shocked to not hear you say Spider-Man there. I was like,
listen,
I was
Spider-Man for the
so
PS4.
ready for the Spider-Man.
Oh
And I
yeah,
was gonna be
Spider-Man
like,
for the PS4 is great, but I have put nowhere near as many hours as Battlefront 2. But yeah, Spider-Man for PS4 is the greatest game to come out in the last decade. But
Spider-Man, Schmider-Man. Oh, no. Mario Odyssey,
I said
Smash Bros.
Whatever.
Oh, come on.
Whatever.
it's too bad to see the new Star Wars Battlefront games come in and ruin the reputation that
That's
the old
true.
ones had, because these new ones, they're all right. Honestly,
Yeah, they're a lot of
gameplay-wise, they're
fun.
pretty good.
Yeah.
But the EA model has ruined them, and
That's
it's
true.
really just sad to see that the Star Wars franchise is gonna, well, Battlefront at least is gonna end like that. It's like, that's too bad.
Yeah. All right. Well, obviously, we are a little over halfway through March. This means that the start of the summer blockbuster season is right around the corner. And there are going to be a lot of movies that stand out and are undoubtedly going to be great. But that also begs the question, what's going to be the best blockbuster of the summer of 2019? John, we're going to start with you this time.
I'm definitely looking forward to that Detective Pikachu. I mean, I'm wearing Pikachu on my hat. I wear Pikachu on my sleeve. Pikachu's a god, and you're putting that awesome character into a live-action American-made movie. It sounds like it's going to be awful, but if you've seen the trailers for it, you feel the anticipation for it, and the way that all the Pokemon look, it just looks great.
It's a live-action Pokemon movie, and the Pokemon look fantastic.
Yeah, honestly, and Ryan Reynolds is Pikachu, and I was hoping for Danny DeVito, not going to lie, but I will definitely take Ryan Reynolds in his place.
All right. Abel, what about you?
For me, the summer blockbuster that I'm waiting for is definitely Spider-Man: Far Away From Home. Spider-Man has always been my favorite superhero. I loved pretty much every single Spider-Man movie. And this one is just going to be really interesting for me. I think it's going to be better than Homecoming. I know some people weren't necessarily satisfied with what Homecoming did, but I think Far Away From Home is going to take a really good step for that character and kind of build it into its own type of model for the MCU.
Definitely, yeah. That one's going to be, I think it's the same director and everything, but I think it's going to have a completely different feel from Homecoming. Kevin, what about you?
Alrighty. I think that for the set of summer blockbusters coming out, the one that I'm most excited for, I think I'm going to have to go with Man of Steel 2. Well, I'm just kidding. DC sucks at movies. No, but I think I'm going to go with, should I go with Avengers Endgame or?
You can do that if you want. That's technically going to be a summer blockbuster.
Yeah, you know what? I just don't know how anybody could be more excited for anything else besides Avengers Endgame. You know, it's like the ending of this chapter of this, era of Marvel movies, so it's just so epic, and it's like the movie to end all superhero movies. So
definitely. All right, well, obviously I could go with a Marvel movie too, but I want to think outside the box a little bit with this, and I'm going to go with Godzilla.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That looks amazing too, but no, my pick is going to be Godzilla King of Monsters, and for one reason only. The Comic-Con trailer that came out last year, I think, is one of the best trailers ever made. I think that trailer was just groundbreaking. Like the score that went with that, especially in the scene where like you see Mothra like their wings rise up. I thought that shot was beautiful.
Oh,
and
dude, this movie looks insane.
it looks insane. It looks crazy, and
It looks
it's gonna
awesome.
be. It's taking what we saw in both Godzilla and Kong Skull Island, and it's gonna be a teaser for. It's obviously a teaser for Godzilla versus King Kong.
It is, but at the same time, it looks epic. It looks
It
like its
does.
own thing. You know, it looks
Yeah.
like Godzilla has a formidable opponent in
Mhm.
what's his name? The tri-dragon head-looking guy.
I can't remember his name. The only one I know from that group is Mothra, other than Godzilla. But yeah, well, let's discuss it. Why do we think our movie is going to be better than the others?
Okay, well, first of all, I would just like to say that if you guys think that your movies, I mean, come on, Spider-Man, we already know he's gonna be in Avengers Endgame. Like, come on, he's not even the main character, so obviously it's gonna be a better movie than Far From Home. And Detective Pikachu, I mean, come on, like, dude, it's Avengers, like, it's like, you know, $1 billion, you know, machine. You're like, I mean, Detective Pikachu, it does look pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, it looks a little nifty, and I think it will make a lot of money. It'll make a splash at the box office for sure. But I don't know how you guys can stand up to Avengers Endgame, man. It's like the Endgame, you know. Like,
It just for me, the reason I picked Detective Pikachu over Avengers Endgame is because I feel like the Avengers have been going on for a long time now, and the exploration of the same series has gone on for a long time now. I feel like they're definitely going to have to bring back all the characters they killed, except for maybe Gamora. And,
Gamora's like the only one that I don't want to bring back.
Gamora.
And who else died? Loki. Loki's probably going to stay dead. Hopefully,
Yeah,
you know, that
hopefully.
guy sucks.
Well, I don't think he sucks, but yeah, I do think he should stay. I will say this about Detective Pikachu is when I saw the second trailer that they just released not too long ago, I said to myself that I would not be surprised if that movie does like surprise everyone and end up being like the biggest movie of the summer, because we've seen that before. Like everyone thought that Guardians 2 a few years ago was going to be the biggest draw, but then I think it was Wonder Woman that ended up being it. But yeah, it seems like every summer we predict that a specific movie is going to be like the biggest draw, and in this case it's obviously going to be Endgame. But I wouldn't be surprised because Pokemon has such a vast fan base.
And it's not like we've seen a Pokemon movie at release in American box offices to the height of this one. The ones we've seen before have been the Japanese anime movies, which,
Yeah, they've all been
which
anime.
are all direct to DVD.
Yeah, and they were all anime, but this is live action, so I would definitely not be surprised if we see just hordes of fans come out.
And it's Warner Bros. And Warner Bros. Honestly has a good track record with hitting us with one good movie a
That's
year.
true.
They have like 8 bad movies and then one good movie. And I'm calling it right now, Detective Pikachu is going to be the good one. Well, Godzilla, actually, that's a Warner Bros. Ooh, Pikachu's in trouble.
Or does that mean that Godzilla is going to be the bad one?
I mean, I guess that's a good debate because I've never seen Warner Bros. Release 2 good movies in a year.
No, come on. That's not facts. That's not factual. Let me think about this
Oh, yeah,
for a
sorry. I
second.
forgot about Man of Steel coming out the same year as, what was it?
Exactly.
I don't
Your point exactly.
No.
Exactly.
No, there was one year, I think it was in 2012, when The Dark Knight Rises came out, and it came out alongside another couple other Warner Bros. Ones, and Warner Bros. Actually beat Disney
It
at the
came
box
out-
office that year.
Warner Brothers that year had Dark Knight Rises and Deathly Hallows Part 2.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it was.
So Deathly Hallows Part 2 is obviously the good movie that year.
Wait, Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out in 2011.
Oh, that's right, it did. Ignore that then. Abel, we've all kind of like dumped on your choice a little bit, so give us a little bit of a rebuttal.
Spider-Man's the best one. It's pretty easy. Endgame, I mean, it's an Avenger movie. So, like, it's going to get that draw of an Avenger movie. But, like, the thing about Avenger movies is that, yeah, they're cool and they're flashy, but, like, you can kind of discard them after a while. And I think, like, Spider-Man has always been an iconic superhero. And I think we've always waited for Marvel to really make this character justice. Even the original Sam Raimi movies, Spider-Man was cool. Like, it filled the generation. But looking back, a lot of people say, oh, it doesn't hold up as well as it does now. The Amazing Spider-Mans, everybody acknowledges that they're probably, obviously, the worst of the three. And I think this iteration is something that I talked about a few days ago with another friend of ours, where, like, this is one of the only times that everybody unanimously really likes the actor playing Spider-Man. Like, I don't hear a lot anymore.
I'm going to have to disagree with you on that. I don't know how much you follow Spider-Man fan bases on Twitter. I've seen a lot, especially lately since the Far From Home trailer came out and Into the Spider-Verse. But there are a lot of people who hate Holland. I'm not included in that, but the Star Wars fan base, especially since like Venom and Spider-Verse came out and Sony's kind of like said, hey, we can make big budget movies and people can like them. Even Venom for some people. Especially since that, the Spider-Man fan base has become almost as toxic as the DCEU or even the Star Wars fan base has been on times. I'm not saying that the DCEU fan base is toxic all the time, like Star Wars can be.
No. It is toxic all the time, almost, pretty much. But it's kind of like Spider-Man's one of those ones where he throws the costume on, right? You can make modifications to the costume. It's sort of like Batman, you know what I mean? People aren't as nitpicky, okay? The most toxic superhero fan base in the world is Superman. Oh my gosh, can you believe how nitpicked he is? It's just unbelievable, people. Ooh.
Ironically, I haven't seen much, but I just may not follow that side of Twitter. I follow a lot of Marvel stuff, so obviously I see that a lot.
I don't follow any movies on Twitter at all.
That's fine.
Like, I'm completely disconnected from fan bases.
No, you're honestly not missing out on much because those three fan bases I would say are the most toxic, and it really sucks because I feel like they're three enjoyable franchises that people are just people feel really entitled to the stuff that comes from it, and when it's not what they want, it kind of sucks. So I'm gonna go ahead or get some closing remarks. Everyone will go around and give a closing remark why they think their movie will be the best of the year of the summer. Abel, we'll go ahead and start with you again.
Okay. Essentially, I don't know. I feel like Spider-Man has a chance to just be a really fun, entertaining movie. It's bringing in a new Spider-Man villain that we've never seen before, which I think is a huge catch.
And it's Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah, as Mysterio. And I think it's just going to be a fun movie. People are going to go, and they're going to have a good time, and I think that's what's going to really stick with people. I think Detective Pikachu, we hope it's going to be a really, really good movie, but there's also a lot of things that can go bad, especially with live-action movies like that. And Endgame, I mean, it's a monster. It's going to probably make $1 billion easily. And I mean, but a lot of characters aren't going to die, so I don't know how people are going to feel about that. And so, there you go.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Kevin, go on ahead.
Alrighty. Well, yeah. Endgame. I just picked it. It's a cop-out pick. It is. You know, it's like, oh, okay. Obviously, it's gonna make $1 billion. It might make $2 billion. I
wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll probably make as much as Infinity War, maybe more. Yeah, but
I think it'll definitely make more than Infinity War because you'll have all those people come out and be like, oh, what's gonna happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's just it's the reason why I picked it is because it's the epic conclusion sort of to this like chapter, you know what I mean? And like everything that comes afterwards is just going to be more stories that build up to the next, thing. It's not going to have to deal with, Thanos, but this has been building up for 10 years. So there's a lot of significance here with this, coming to an end. Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, they're going to be out of here. It's going to, it's going to
Or are they?
It's gonna break some people's hearts. What?
We don't know if they're gonna be out quite yet. We won't know until we see it.
Hey, listen. 1 second. Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. They might come back. You know what I'm saying? In like 5 years and do like an X-Men versus Avengers movie. I just want to I want to go on record saying that right now because it's totally something that could happen for like one movie. You know what I mean? Like, you never know.
I mean, if it's X-Men versus Avengers and you have Wolverine in the mix, it's Wolverine versus no one because he's got him in 10 seconds. We can talk about that later.
John, give us your closing remark.
Detective Pikachu is the greatest movie of all time, or will be the greatest movie of all time. I'm not going to back down on it. Detective Pikachu, oh my gosh. Ryan Reynolds is playing Pikachu. If Danny DeVito is playing Pikachu, I don't think anyone in the world would have an excuse not to see the movie. I'm a little disappointed in Ryan Reynolds. But still, it's Ryan Reynolds. It's not like they picked, Tom Holland or what's his name? Tony Stark? What's that real guy's name? Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, I forgot because no one cares. Ryan Reynolds played Deadpool. Arguably the best superhero of all time.
This is not facts at
all.
All.
Deadpool has a crotch gun.
All right, I'm just going to say real quick that Godzilla came out 2014, blew everyone away. No one knew what to expect, and it turned out to be an amazing movie. Kong came out 2 years ago, and while, yeah, there are some things about it, it was really good. It was really good, probably even better than Godzilla. I think that each movie is going to be better. And yeah, you got Endgame. Yeah, you got Marvel. You got Pikachu. Yeah, but this is going to be a giant moth fighting Godzilla. There's nothing cooler than that, and this is obviously going to get people hyped for Godzilla versus Kong. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that comes out and like shocks people as one of the best.
To be fair, I'm usually not hyped or care about any movies, and I'm hyped for all 4 of these movies.
Oh, yeah.
So that's saying a lot about the year we have ahead of us.
That's
like
true.
Last year, I didn't go to Avengers Infinity War until like 2 months after it came out, and now I'm like, okay, I've got to see all these movies. I'm not going to wait. The day they release, I'm going to them. So I guess this year I think is a lot better than the years we've had recently.
And Star Wars comes out at the end of the year. We have the ending of this saga of Star Wars. You know, that's crazy.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break here now, but before I do that, I do want to give a quick plug to our website. That's right. If you didn't know, the Screenmen have a website too. Over there, we post all sorts of different articles from some of our most talented writers, so I would definitely recommend going and checking that out. If you want to, head on over to www.societyofscreenmen.com. Again, that's www.societyofscreenmen.com. And with that, we'll be right back. And we're back with the Screenmen Society Podcast. As we mentioned before, this introductory episode is very much for us to sort of give our idea of what our tastes are in media. So with that, I want to open up this next question to you guys, which is, what is the most underrated genre? And this question pertains to anything, including movies, shows, and video games. And John, we're going to start with you this time.
I think the most underrated genre is serious superhero movies, such as Logan, where they actually take more serious emotion than they do the superhero bits of the movie. Logan took a hard drive at making Wolverine feel like a likable character who was also a total tough guy. I don't want to say a bad word, but total tough guy.
Yeah.
He's one of the coolest superheroes before that movie, and that movie puts Logan down as probably, in my opinion, my favorite superhero of all time, because they made him relatable, even though he's the most unrelatable person in the entire world, because he's literally invincible.
So you're more going with the subgenre of like serious superhero films, because obviously you have different types of superhero films. But
yeah, I'm saying serious superhero films, because I feel like we've only seen one, like super serious, like goes more into the emotion of the character rather than like the fighting or the villain. It just takes the actual like life of the superhero and puts it into like a perspective. I think another movie that did this, and I know this is going to sound awful, but Spider-Man 3 did this well. I mean, it made you feel like Tobey Maguire was this serious guy who actually had issues because of what the suit had done to him. Like, he was never a bad guy before the movie, but in the third movie, he becomes this horrible dude because he's been changed by the suit. So I feel like we've not seen the surface scratched well enough, and every time we do, it doesn't get that much, hype. Because Logan got some hype, but got completely shafted at the Oscars. Like, no one cared about it at the Oscars, which is ridiculous because, in my opinion, if you weigh it against the movies that won that year, it was so much better.
It was nominated for Adapted, right?
Adapted, yeah.
Screenplay.
Yeah, and then
for Adapted.
And then that year was rough because we had Blade Runner 2049 and Logan come out, and both of those movies were like completely overlooked for best movie, and those were both amazing movies.
Those movies slapped.
All right. Well, I have some arguments for some of what you have to say, but we'll get to that in a second. I'm going to go over to Abel. What is your pick?
For most underrated genre?
Yeah.
Probably horror movies.
Horror movies?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think horror movies is a very underrated genre. Yeah, I know. I would say horror movies because, like, the genre right now is very mellow, and a lot of people are just like, oh, yeah, I want to go see this movie because it looks scary or whatever. But I feel like people are forgetting how artistic horror movies can really be.
Sure.
When we're talking about movies like in the 80s, you're talking about Nightmare on Elm Street, like Freddy Krueger as a creation of this thing that comes into your dreams and murders you. When you're thinking about like all of these like Scream, super meta like commentary on horror movies, the cliches, everything that happens. Like you talk about Saw, the first Saw, that's this psychological thriller talking about morals of whether is it right to torture these people that have committed horrible crimes but are like get off scot-free. Like these movies that touch on topics that in normal movies they don't talk about because it's not comfortable. And I think horror movies really do that, and they're able to do that because it's a R-rated. Well, not anymore, but a lot of them should be R-rated, and you have these ability to tell complex stories. And I think horror movies, a lot of the time for me, I think are so much more entertaining when it has these really cool, compelling stories than regular movies.
Yeah. All right, and now I will ask real quick before we get to Kevin and then the argument. Would you put the horror game genre in that same category too, or do you feel completely different about those two things?
I love the horror game genre. I think with Resident Evil, it's resurrected it a little bit. Games like Until Dawn did a really good job of that. I think that's still on the up and up. I don't see a lot of gamers pass on horror games because I think a lot of indie developers are doing really good in horror. So I wouldn't say...
So you wouldn't say it's as underrated as you think horror movies are?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right, Kevin, you're up.
Alrighty, so I personally think that the most underrated genre in video games, movies, TV shows has to be historical fiction for me. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there's so many different eras that, like, I see one or two films and I'm like, man, those are great film. You know, the way they portrayed, you know, characters or something. Or, you know, one example is this movie. It's called The Duelist, right? It takes place during the Napoleonic Wars, you know, in the early 1800s. And I just like, it's a really intricate, you know, era in history where, you know, there's the costume design, every single thing, every element about it. You know, it's really, you know, I just love the style and stuff. And, you know, I don't see enough of it. You know, I'm constantly like, you know, where can I find a movie that's, you know, like that? Where can I find a piece that, you know, it takes place, you know, in this time period, in this era, you know, and it's kind of irritating. You know, I know the Assassin's Creed video games have done a good job of like covering a lot of eras in history and stuff like that. So that's kind of a neat thing, but, you know, I haven't really gotten around to playing a lot of those games. So, yeah, I just wish more historical fiction, you know, stuff would pop out, you know, like in TV shows or in movies.
All right. So for mine, it's kind of similar to yours, Abel, but I'm taking a different spin on it. I'm going with more thriller type movies. Not necessarily horror, but like the ones that you gotta like check while you're in the theater, or like, is my heart still beating? Am I still breathing? Those are the kind of movies that I think are really good, but we don't see enough of. Like I would consider Dunkirk a thriller because I saw that movie in like the biggest screen possible. I saw that because I remember when that movie came out, everyone's like, oh, you got to see this in like the biggest way you can. And I did. And I remember several times like having to make sure that I was still breathing, that my heart was still beating, because that movie freaked me out because it was just so well done. And then you have movies like Get Out, which I consider more of a thriller than an actual horror movie. I didn't think it was very scary. I thought it was more like, oh, what's going to happen type deal. But yeah, I think that we just don't see enough of those kind of movies.
IMAX was the only way to see Dunkirk.
This is true.
It was so good in IMAX. When I watched it with my parents, because my parents didn't go to see it when I watched it in IMAX, but when I watched it with them afterwards, I was like super underwhelmed. I was like, did not do what it did in the theater. If you see that movie, you have to see it in a room where you can feel the clock, where you can feel the guns. Like, the coolest thing about seeing it in IMAX was when the bombs hit, you could feel it. Like, you could feel it in your bones, and you were scared with them. You were like, oh, man, what if I get hit by one of those bombs? And you're like, no, I'm not there.
Yeah, and there's the last thing I'll say before we start the arguments is that I feel like a lot of people associate horror and thriller together when I think that they're two completely different things.
No, they're different.
They're completely different, but I feel like a lot of people will still associate them together, and that's why I think that it's more underrated, because not many people, I think, realize just how different and how special those movies can actually be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So with that, we're going to open it up to discussion.
Alrighty. Well, John, what was your pick again?
Like serious, like superhero.
Okay,
like
right. What you said about
narratives.
that? First of all, I just want to say, okay, you said that Logan was like the most unrelatable superhero. That's not true.
I'm saying before Logan. Like before Logan, the Wolverine was the most unrelatable superhero, and Logan makes you feel like he's very relatable.
I get what you're saying.
Because
I will say
before
this
that, he was this invincible guy who could get shot, go underwater, drown, and live. And now, after watching Logan, you're like, okay, he's human. He's got these, he's got all these problems that they don't show in the other movies.
Well, I'm gonna say this about your subgenre, is that I don't think it's underrated. I do think that there aren't enough good movies of it. But here's the thing: is I feel like so many times, filmmakers, especially in the past decade, when superhero movies have become this phenomenon that they are, I feel like so many filmmakers are trying to make serious films. And whenever someone talks about serious superhero films, you know the movie that comes to mind?
Dark Boy.
No, Fantastic. Because I remember all the advertising for that movie. The first trailer that came out, it was this somber feeling, and it showed like these four characters as these depressed people. And I remember thinking, that's not the Fantastic Four. And then the end result was just this massive cluster of whatever it was. That's the only movie, by the way, that I've gotten up while watching for the first time to go to the bathroom.
We can all agree that the Fantastic Four movie was awful. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Fantastic
was terrible.
Train wreck ever.
It was terrible.
And then I'm not saying it's necessarily the DCEU's fault, but I feel like every movie until I'll say Wonder Woman tried to have a serious tone to it. Like, you even saw the 2017 trailer that they had for it was 2016. I'm sorry. The 2016 trailer that they had for Justice League was completely different from the end of the movie that we got. And I think Logan and Man of Steel was completely different as well, and I think that one worked out really well. But then you had Batman v Superman, which was just a mess a bit as well, even though I really like it.
I guess what I should say is I don't mean serious like Fantastic Four serious. I mean like character developing, like relatable stories.
Yeah, character driven.
Like I'm not, because Fantastic Four never took the time to develop its characters, and that's part of the reason it's awful. It didn't go inside their feelings. It didn't go inside their trauma like it does with Logan.
Yeah,
when Professor X dies in Logan, you feel it feels traumatic. And that's what I think. That's why I think what I mean is like movies that make you feel the personality of the superhero through it.
I want to ask you this real quick. Would you, obviously superheroes are just as big on TV as they are in movies. Would you say that subgenre travels to TV as well? Would you include that?
I would say it definitely works a lot better in TV. I mean, it gets a lot more views in TV. Like
Yeah,
Daredevil obviously
Exactly.
is loved because he's a person. I mean, he's not a person, but he's a person.
The one thing that I'll say about yours is I think that it really depends on the character, because I think with people like Logan, Daredevil, The Punisher, characters like those, it works for. So I think I wouldn't say that yours is necessarily underrated. I think it's just a subgenre that only works depending on the character. Fantastic Four doesn't work. Spider-Man 3, I wouldn't even say is a serious movie. I think people are coming to realize that movie is goofy as heck. And that it's taken God knows how long for people to just realize that.
Jack, just a second. I think what John is saying is movies, he wants more superhero movies that are set in the drop back of like a superhero setting and like have like literary themes, like you know what I mean, like literary, like with character, like driven stories,
like it's art.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like with the DCU or Worlds of DC, whatever it is they're doing. Okay, so everybody, was like, oh, these movies are too serious. They're not like, Marvel movies, stuff like that. But I think Warner Bros. And, whoever was the head of the DC film stuff, they were like, why would people want to watch more Marvel movies? It's like, come on, we're our own thing. Why would we want to watch, if they wanted to watch a Marvel movie, watch Marvel movies. You have to have an identity, something to set them apart. So, it was kind of a good thought, like, oh, we should be more serious. And I think that, it was a good thought too. I don't think that that's bad. I just think that some of the characters like, Superman and stuff like that, like how do you make that serious, And I guess they tried as best as they could, and that just doesn't work out. So it's it's hard.
I don't last thing, I don't think Man of Steel is a horrible movie. I think the script is really good.
Oh no,
I think
Superman's.
I think
Man of
it's
Steel is one of my favorite movies.
I think it's executed not great. The color grading they put on the movie is not great, but I think the story is honestly on par with some of the best superhero
Oh yeah,
movies of all time.
Man of Steel is it gets way too much criticism, but that's Superman fans like, oh, look at his costume, oh, he doesn't have red trunks, you know what I mean? It's just every single thing is nitpicked, you know what I mean? It's just it gets kind of loony after a while, but yeah.
I'll say this about yours, Abel, is I feel especially in the past few years that horror, in movies especially, since we've gotten this, like, we're kind of in a renaissance right now of good horror movies coming out.
This is true.
How dare
So
you
I
steal
wouldn't-
my line.
I wouldn't necessarily say that it would be underrated anymore. Maybe a few years ago, maybe, but I think horror has always been this genre that no matter how bad it is, will always be popular. Because you have people go, we've all worked at the movie theater. We can all attest to this. People go see horror movies no matter how bad they can be. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it makes it underrated. You know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, but in the sense that when we look at it from a perspective, maybe not of the consumer, of people that are buying tickets, but more of a look at film in general.
Sure.
I think when people think of horror movies, you think of, oh, I just want to see something that'll like give me like some creeps for whatever. Like last year, like Slender Man was extremely boring.
Yeah.
Like there are so many other there are still so many movies that don't do much.
Sure.
And it hurts me because I feel like when you have movies like A Quiet Place, which you could argue is a thriller, which everybody does.
I consider that more horror-esque, but yeah, there are definitely thriller elements to it.
Get Out, again, debatable, but I think there are a lot of cool, interesting elements in Get Out that makes it really creepy and eerie, and it has obviously a lot of social commentary and stuff like that. And like these are movies that are very bright. Like Conjuring 2, like a lot of people like Conjuring 1, but I feel like Conjuring 1 still is a little too safe in the sense that it has still a lot of these cliches that are so normal to horror movies.
Sure.
Where I thought 2 was so refreshing because it had like differences and it had like it would turn cliches and like flip them around and say, oh, you think for example the little girl, like the whole thing was like, oh, is she faking it? Because they had proof, oh look, you know, she's doing this, and the Lorraine couldn't sense the demon, so she was like, I'm not getting anything from this, so I don't know if what she's saying is even true. Is she over exaggerating?
Right.
And like they brought that part into the movie because everybody's like, oh well, these are people are just making these up to become famous and da 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 da. And so I thought that was an interesting element in part of the movie. And so I feel like there are a lot of horror movies that are just like too safe, like they don't take risks.
That's fair.
And so when people watch horror movies, you know, it's just like, oh, we'll see if it's good.
Yeah.
I feel like the biggest problem with horror movies for a lot of people is that you have a good genre of horror thrillers, and then you have a bad genre of The Nun.
Yeah.
All those just
100 movies exactly like The Nun that everybody goes and sees.
you
that
have
are
those
just
big budget horror
awful.
movies. Yeah, you have those big budget horror movies which have a lot of money attached to it, but are just so bad, and
They're
so
like-
they end up losing all that money.
Like The Nun. If you watch The Nun, I watched like 2 minutes of it because I worked at the Warren when that movie came out, and I walked in there, and it's the worst acting I've ever seen in my entire life. It's an undeveloped script, and it's thousands of dollars thrown into like expensive lights, and they're not even good lights. Like
That's fair.
just expensive
Yeah.
lights.
Historical fiction. Do it.
And then
Go.
and then for historical fiction, Kevin, I have to disagree with you. My reason is very much similar to what I said with Abel, is especially right now we have a lot of movies, shows, and games coming out which are a lot of historical fiction. We just had Red Dead 2, which is historical fiction and is considered maybe the best game of last year. And then you have Once Upon a Time in Hollywood coming out later this year, which is going to be historical fiction. You have Inglourious Bastards. You have Dunkirk, which can be kind of considered as historical fiction because they did take some liberties with that.
I would
Okay.
say that Dunkirk and Red Dead are not, but yeah.
Okay, well, listen. What I'm talking about when I say historical fiction is I'm talking about different eras in history that just haven't been explored. Like movies are just not even willing to touch it, whether because, you know, they're worried about inaccuracies, they're worried about, you know, I mean, like, come on, there's no movies about Spanish Inquisition. We don't have any movies about, you know, like, Napoleonic Wars is like one movie I can think of that's significant that, has to do with like the French Revolution or, the American Revolution, for crying out loud. It's just like, come on, I just want to see some more content with that stuff. It's really...
Well, I will say they do a lot. They may not do as many movies about the American Revolution, but they do a lot of shows. Like you have Turn that was on for a few years. You had the John Adams show with Paul Giamatti. You do have a lot of shows that deal with the American independence. Sure, you may not have as many movies, but I do think that I do agree with you with the fact that there are a lot of eras that Hollywood just won't touch, and I can't say as to why they may not.
Well, it has a lot to do with because historians and a lot of people, that have access to Google, they're like, oh, well, that's historically inaccurate because, we know a lot more about these eras in between, like, say now in the medieval period where people are like, oh, this takes place in like the medieval times or the Vikings, you know what I mean? It's like, we don't know a whole lot, it's just really, it's hard for people to be like, that didn't happen back then, and it's like stuff like that, I just feel like people are really worried about like, historical inaccuracies when it comes to that, so they don't want to touch it. And plus the costume design, it's really hard and expensive, to produce that type of stuff. But I just wish, personally, there was more more stuff.
All right. Any closing thoughts?
No.
Well, Superman is the best superhero of all time.
That has nothing to do with what we were just talking about. So we're going to go ahead and move on. This is going to be our last topic for today, and I think this is a really interesting one. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about this because this could go anywhere, I think. If you could remake any movie, show, or game, what would it be? Now, you got to remember that we're talking about remakes, not reboots. So you're not rebooting a franchise like Spider-Man or something. That doesn't count. You're like taking something and like completely remaking it. And I'm going to start with mine because this is a movie that I watched a few weeks ago for film class, and it fascinated me and got me thinking of like how it would be portrayed nowadays, and that's Sunset Boulevard, because you have a movie that deals with Hollywood back in the 60s and this aging actress out of her prime in this setting. And I remember watching it. It's a really good movie too. I'm not a big fan of film noir, but I thought it was a really good movie. And I just remember sitting there thinking the whole time, how interesting would this be if it were in today's Hollywood? Because you had something like that with La La Land, but you didn't have that kind of concept with La La Land. So I would think that it'd be really interesting to kind of see that movie remade in today's time. I don't know about you guys, but I don't know if you guys have seen that movie or not. But yeah, for me, Sunset Boulevard I think would be a really interesting movie to see in today's time. John, we'll go to you next.
My personal pick was Citizen Kane. I would love to see a Citizen Kane remake. I think it's a super interesting movie with some amazing set pieces. The only reason I could see not remaking Citizen Kane is because right now it's an Orson Welles classic, and it's hard to touch on Orson Welles classics because he's such a genius. If I was going to put the reins in the hands of anyone, though, I would definitely give it to someone like either Christopher Nolan or I would give it to Wes Anderson, because I feel like they both could handle the somber yet like kind of off-putting feel of the whole movie of Citizen Kane. But yeah.
All right. Kevin, I'm going to go to you next. Film, show, or game, what would you remake?
Alrighty. So, personally, I think I'm going to go with Willow on this one. It's like a cult classic. That movie is a gem. I don't know. I love it. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I'm kind of I'm a fantasy dork. So, I just think that with, a bigger budget and, with the abilities that, filmmakers have with like, visual effects these days, I think they could make an awesome Willow remake. But, at the same time, they'd have to be careful because, you could mess it up really easily.
Oh, yeah. Would you cast Peter Dinklage or would you get Warwick Davis again?
I think a new, actor,
New actor?
Peter Dinklage, that would actually be pretty awesome. He's got the star power that could actually maybe work, but if not,
it would draw the movie for sure.
Yeah, if not, I think they could go with a new, no-name actor, and that would be that would also be kind of cool, But also, Val Kilmer, Mad Mardigan is a really iconic role, you know what I'm saying? So they would have to find somebody, pretty niche to get that.
Definitely. Abel, you're last. What about you?
A movie that I really feel should be like remade is always been The Last Airbender, because I feel like the movie did absolutely no justice to
That's
the
fair.
show.
That's a great thing to say.
That's fair.
Like the show is so smart and it gives so much care to these characters, and like it's about developing characters to the point that you can actually care about what's happening. And I think M. Night Shyamalan, I mean, that was one of his first big action movies that we know he's not the best particularly. I feel like getting it in the hands of a director that can really hold characters and drive that story. And I know it's difficult to smash 12, 14 episodes of a show into one movie, but even still having like some grit behind characters, even remotely getting the characters right, even by just naming them correctly, would go a long way.
Oh yeah, totally.
And I think like it's just the action of that movie was so poor. Like the CGI was terrible.
Yeah.
Like in the movie, 5 people had to move one boulder, while in the show, like one person could build like a fort of giant rocks. Like you never got a sense of the world. You never got a sense of these characters. You never got a sense of what it was that they were trying to do. And I feel like remaking that by giving it the care of the characters, by giving the care of the world, understanding these abilities and what makes them so great, I think it goes so long, and I think it's so deserving of a remake to show people how great the show was, at least.
Sure. Okay. All right. Who wants to start up the discussion? Because I have thoughts, but I'll let you guys start with whatever you guys want to say.
I don't know who quite had the hands on Kubo and the Two Strings, but to go with Abel's thing, I would love to see the guy who made Kubo and the Two Strings do a Last Airbender movie.
So you're not saying as much as live action as like motion capture for that?
I mean, not necessarily motion capture, but just the writer who wrote that movie did such a good job with that concept, and I feel like those two. They're really different, but I feel like that could translate really well.
Yeah.
So I would love to see that explored. I mean, obviously, I don't think in this era we're gonna see another Last Airbenders movie unless the series gets a huge reboot. Yeah. But Netflix, I mean, it's hopeful. It's hopeful, you know.
I'll say this about yours, Abel, is while I agree that it does need to be remade, I'm afraid that it would come off more as a reboot because it is a franchise, and I think Shyamalan's plan at the beginning, before we realized how much of a dumpster fire was to make it a franchise, and so I don't necessarily know what that would be, but I feel like if they were to remake it, it would come off more as a reboot. So while I do think that it's definitely needed, I don't know. That's just me. And then for John's, real quick, you said something where it's at this point where it's untouchable, and I think that's probably going to be one of those movies that stays untouchable.
Yeah, I immediately agree now that it's untouchable. The second I thought about it after I had this great thought in my head. Oh man, Wes Anderson could totally do this in his own style.
No, they definitely could.
And then I was like, no, because it's already as good as it's going to get. There's a reason everybody calls it the #1 movie of all time. It's not because the idea. It's not because of the movie, the script, or anything. It's because Orson Welles executed everything about that movie exactly the way it should have been. And even if they did the perfect remake, it still wouldn't be as good because it is one of the perfect. I think it's the perfect exploration of that movie.
Yeah, it's like remaking Titanic or like Godfather. It's just, it's in that gold status. It's just,
it could be done with some of the talent that we have today, but at this point, is there even a reason?
Yeah, why is it necessary? It just isn't. Yeah, it's like that Ben-Hur remake that came out a couple years back. What was the even point of that? It's just like, what?
Sure.
Because the original Ben-Hur was so good.
Oh,
and you're not going to stand up to a Titan that was
right.
Who was I don't remember who the original actor was.
Charlton Heston.
But he's a legend, and there's no way you can hire an actor nowadays. Well, even if it's the perfect actor, they're not going to stand up to Charlton Heston because Charlton Heston is unique in his storytelling.
Yeah, for sure, totally.
Kevin, give us some more of your thoughts.
Well, I just want to go back to the Airbender thing. That's a great, Abel. that's a money thing. It kind of gets muddled in there with the whole, oh, is it a franchise, or would it be a reboot versus a remake? I don't know. Look, that first one, it doesn't even count. Like, that first movie was just so bad, and I was one of those people that was like, oh, Last Airbender, everyone tells me to watch it. I was one of those people growing up where I was like, I'm not watching this fake anime stuff. I was just like, I was garbage. I didn't even pay attention to it. But then you guys convinced me to watch it a couple years back. Like, what was it, 2 years ago? And I just binge watched the whole thing, and it was so good. And I was like, why is it only 3 seasons? This is so good. And I was an adult, doing this. Like, come on, that story is really, really good. And it could, that movie just didn't do it any justice, and it's a shame.
What movie did you pick again?
I picked Willow.
Okay. Here's what I'll say about Willow is I think that's also one of those movies like Citizen Kane that I think cult classic is a weird subgenre as well, because like those movies you don't want touched either.
Right. I know.
So,
that's a good point. But the thing is that some of the battles in that movie, they're like, oh man, they're so fun and they're so, corny and everything. But it's just like, what if, you remade it and like you made some of those battles bigger, and you made, some of the set pieces not as, hokey, and some of the visual effects not as, as bad as they were back then, but it's just, I don't know.
That's fair. Well, I'll say that I feel like out of all of them, Sunset Boulevard. Have you guys seen Sunset Boulevard?
I have not.
I have no idea.
I would definitely recommend. It's the movie where the line "I'm ready for my close-up" came from, and I would definitely recommend watching it because it may change your mind. It's about this actress who's no longer in her prime, trying to get back into her prime.
Mm-hmm.
She meets this young writer who she falls in love with and teams up with, and she ends up going crazy and killing him. But yeah, just watching that, I kept feeling to myself, man, this could be really well done in today's time as well. So I don't know. All of them, I would say Citizen Kane, I don't want touch. Willow,
I agree.
I could take either way.
Mm-hmm.
Last Airbender, definitely. It would just be a slippery slope.
I mean, it would be a reboot instead of a remake.
Yeah,
I think it would.
Yeah.
Well, I do agree though.
It sorely needs it.
Yeah. Yes.
But hey, maybe the TV show that Netflix is doing, maybe the TV show will be good, and hopefully they got the same writers, didn't they, to do the live
not
action?
sure.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere that the same guys who wrote the original cartoon,
They should.
they're writing the live action TV show.
Yeah, they needed a break, which is understandable because they wrote that show for like 8 years straight.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any closing thoughts on any of these?
Yeah, there are a lot of movies that desperately need remakes, like
There really are.
In just reboots in general.
I'll say that like 3 of these 4 movies I don't think need remade, but I think they would be really good as remade.
I mean, it happens a lot more with video games.
That's true.
Especially because, and video games really need it because like graphics are like, I mean,
they're
with movies you can go back 80 years and it's gonna look black and white, but it'll look somewhat the same. I mean, as bad as it is, as different as it is, it'll look somewhat the same.
Sure.
With games, you have complete leaps and bounds different now. If you've seen the Resident Evil 2 gameplay, oh my gosh, it's so different. But it's so, in a game like Resident Evil 2, it's so necessary. And I think we didn't talk about video games, but there can be I think video games are, 100% necessary, especially the 1990 good ones. Yeah. They totally deserve it.
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
Some video games, even like masterpieces, I feel like they could remake and like it'd still be, because it's a game, you know what I mean? You're playing it, and like why would you not want to just enhance with new technology and stuff like that? Why wouldn't you just want to like enhance play experience and everything? And so I think you're right about that. That's a great thought, that video games, no matter what it is, they can kind of always be remastered and revisited and stuff like that.
Definitely.
I'm still upset at EA that they won't remaster the Mass Effect trilogy, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
Why?
EA is afraid of making money.
It's so angry.
All right. Well, any other thoughts?
Well, I think Superman's the best superhero of all time.
All right. Well, that's going to conclude today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Again, this episode was very much for us to give an idea of what our taste in movies, shows, and games may be. If you liked what you heard, be sure to follow us on SoundCloud or feel free to subscribe on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter and check out what we're posting on www.societyscreenmen.com. Is there anything that you guys want to plug before we go?
If you have the time and you don't hate yourself, if you do hate yourself, go subscribe to Waddle Gaming. I'm I'm looking for a fat hundy.
Anything else? All right. In that case, thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you later.